Hello and welcome to Lisa's Stamp Studio. My name is Lisa Curcio. Today is Monday, July 19th, and it's 2021. This is a YouTube live streaming event. And whether this is your first time visiting my channel or you are returning, I'm thrilled that you're here with me tonight. I don't know about you, but I love learning new things. And I have been experimenting lately with stencils. Now, in the Stampin' Up! World, they call them masks. But I have 5 techniques I'm going to be teaching you today. And we're going to step things up as we go through those 5. I have finished cards for all 5 of those techniques that I'm going to be sharing with you tonight. And I can't wait to give you a really great tip about how to use colored pencils with these stepped up stenciling techniques as well. Now, a few things before we get started. When the live stream is over tonight, you're going to find a link down in the video description below. That's going to head you over to my website where you're going to find this. It's an 11-page project sheet for all the cards that I'm going to be sharing with you tonight, as well as the techniques. You're going to find multiple pictures of those projects. You're going to also find a supply list and the cutting dimensions. That's going to make reproducing these projects really easy for you at home. Now, again, that's not going to be available until the live stream is over. Next, I want to just take a minute to let you know that we would love to interact with you during tonight's live. But in order to do that, you're going to need to sign into your YouTube account, which is your Gmail address. Now, that's a YouTube thing, not a Lisa Stamp Studio thing. So you do need to log in so that we can chat with you. And then finally, I want to introduce you to Gina Hawley. You'll see Gina's name here in blue with a little wrench by it. She's our YouTube moderator. If you look very closely, you'll see her last name is hyphenated, and she is also a Curcio. Gina is my daughter. She's also the sales and marketing director here at Lisa Stamp Studio. And by no fault of her own, she's been stamping her whole life because of me since she was 5 years old, all married and grown up now. And she is here to answer your questions. She's very versed in stamping, so she's able to help you. Because quite frankly, you've come to watch me stamp and there's no way that I can keep up with your comments. So feel free to reach out to Gina with questions and those will be over in the chat. All right, I think we're all ready. I'm going to go ahead and pivot the camera down and we'll get you all zoomed in. Here we go. When tonight's live stream is over, if you enjoy what you see, it would be a huge blessing if you would do me a favor, hit that thumbs up button, which is a like, and share it. Put it on Pinterest or put it on your other social media platforms because that helps us a lot here on YouTube. As a reminder, just in case this is your first time joining me, there is a huge designer series paper sale over at lisastampstudio.com. Almost all the designer series papers that are in the annual catalog are on sale. I think there's only 2 that are excluded. 15% off, and I don't know about you, but that is equivalent to shipping, and that's equivalent to a little bit of sales tax. So that's a big saver. I want to make sure that you know that it's ending soon. So go grab your designer series paper. I am a huge fan of designer paper. All right, we're going to start with this, and you're going to notice tonight that the desktop surface is looking a little bit different than what you might normally see. And that's because I'm going to need that grid paper underneath me to be able to kind of sponge off a little bit of color, because if you're like me and your ink pads are a little juicy, you're going to need to be able to control that coverage. I do get a lot of questions about this. Now, there's a few things I want to make sure that you know about, and one of them is about my craft room favorites. These are not Stampin' Up! Products, but they're products I use here in the studio that are tried and true that I love. And this is one of those things we get lots of questions about. This is my little wood cutting board. You see how thin it is? Gotta love the handle. And you're gonna see how I use this tonight for these 5 stepped up stenciling card making techniques. You'll see also the tape, and I do want to talk to you about that. That is the delicate surface frog tape, and I love that for stenciling. Again, that's going to be in my craft room favorites. Now, if you're wondering how to find my craft room favorites, head over to my website at lisastampstudio.com, click on shop, and then under the shop, you'll see craft room favorites. And you're going to have to scroll. There's a lot of goodies there for you. Now, let's talk a little bit about stencils. In the Stampin' Up! World, they are called masks. Now, I have 2 different packages here, which is what's being currently carried. There's 4 different stencils and the plenty of patterns, and there's other 4 stencils and the basic patterns. Now, I'm going to be using a variation of all of these. I'm just going to set those off to the side so they're easy for me to reach once we get started here. That tape that's on that surface here is going to play a really, really important role. And that's going to help anchor our paper down for this first technique. So let me go ahead and let's just grab my supplies. And I've got a piece of cardstock here. And I'm going to recommend that when you do this at home, that you work with an oversized piece of paper. I have found that my edges sometimes don't come out perfect because you're experimenting as you go. So if you cut the paper bigger, then you could always trim it down to get just the size you need for the project that you make. And here's another tip. Just because these stenciling techniques that I'm using on all the cards I'm going to share with you, there's 5 of them, are for backgrounds, don't underestimate die cutting these and using these for beautiful dies too. So that little piece of tape has been rolled up into a little circle. That's going to hold that cardstock in place. Now I've pulled out this really fun geometric pattern, and this one is from the Plenty of Patterns. I had to look at the package because I had so many out. And you're going to see that this stencil is basically the same on both sides, nothing fancy. They are thin, they are plastic, and they work wonderful. And the reason you want them thin is because you don't want that hump or bump between where you're laying the cover and the paper. Now I'm using basic white cardstock, and I do have some tape here. I added a little tab to the end by folding a corner back. That works really, really well for me because that gives me an area to kind of pull that tape off without having to peel it once I get started. You want to anchor your stencil down. And remember, I did cut this bigger than I need. So I've got a little bit on there. It's no big deal. And then I'm going to do one more here at the bottom. I have a tendency to have a little bit of a heavy hand. So I like to make sure that it's well anchored so that nothing lifts. Now, if you're really ginger when you're doing this, then you probably only need a couple. But I do recommend anchoring it from the bottom as well as from the top so nothing slips. All right, here comes the fun part. Let's start with some coloring. And each of these 5 stenciling techniques is a little bit different. And then I have 2 really stepped up ones with great ideas for you towards the end. So make sure you hang with me. I'm going to start with Melon Mambo ink. Now, if you are a relatively new stamper and you have ink pads, they are probably extremely juicy. So tip number 1 for you is when you're using your blending brushes, you're going to want to make sure that if this is a very high concentration of wet ink, that when you load the brush, you tap a little bit off on your scratch paper, because otherwise the very first measurement of ink is going to be very, very strong. So I'm going to want this one a little bit strong for tonight, but I'm going to try controlling it so I can give you some tips. Make sure your hands are braced outside of where you're going to stencil. And I'm going to hold it like this because I have osteoarthritis here and it can be painful. So I find that by holding it at the head and not holding it here where I have to squeeze more, is a little bit more user friendly for my hands. So maybe perhaps you struggle with a little arthritis as well. That's just a tip for you. I'm using circular motions because that works really well for me. What I don't want is I don't want those pounced little round bristle looks. So I want to add some color. How much color you add is completely up to you. Now the ink that's here dries pretty quickly, but you can go back and pick up just a little bit more to kind of fade it out, which is what I'm doing here. And if you want a little bit more, you can add it. All right, I think you get the idea. All right, I'm going to take this, I'm going to leave this off to the side. And while I'm changing colors, I want to talk to you about the blending brushes. These are going to be found in my online store at lisastampstudio.com. I like to dedicate one to each color. The reason I do that is because I do a lot of stenciling, okay? But you can use dishwater and soap, and you can allow these to air dry. They will become stained because of the pigmentation, but don't let that scare you. You can go ahead and just make sure that they're really, really clean. This is my pink brush. So when I go to put it away, I'm gonna run all that extra pink off here on my grid paper so that I can use it in another shade. And I'm not gonna do that while you're all watching, but you get the idea. I'm moving over to pumpkin pie. So let me take that brush and I'm going to switch that now with this one. This is my orange brush. And again, I'm going to add ink. Very important about this. Remember, this is probably still damp, so you don't want to add another color to the top. Otherwise, you're going to have a little bit of a muddy mess. So I'm going to work up there, just making sure that my coverage is good, but making sure it's not too heavy. And then what we're going to do is we are going to overlap a little bit. Do you see how I got a little heavy-handed right there? Well, that's okay. We're going to do our best to kind of fix that. So I'm going to load this up even more because I know that I want a little bit more intensity here. And again, I'm holding it by the head of the brush and I'm just running it across the paper. You're going to want to be very, very careful about blending. So let me give you an idea. Perhaps you would have wanted maybe a shade of brown. Well, with brown and pink together, you're going to get a really, really awkward color. So keep in mind that when you even blend with a brush, that can change the hue. We're switching over now to Daffodil Delight. Wait until you see this. This is going to be stunning. The other important tip about stenciling that you need to know is this. When you lift this, it's going to be far more intense than it looks right now. So please keep that in mind as we move forward through the other techniques. So I'm laying down some of that beautiful daffodil color. And I always like to go lightly, and I can always go back and add more. This technique that I'm teaching you right now, when I peel this up, you're going to have a real wow. Keep in mind, this can be light or it can be heavy. Now, in the project sheet, I purposely made you one that was slightly different. This is Granny Apple Green, because I want to be able to share with you the two different intensities. So I'm doing this one very, very dark. And then this is the Granny Apple. Again, clean spot here on that grid paper because you don't want to pick up a previous tone. And then we are going to run this over this. Oh, rainbow colors. Aren't they heartwarming? They're so pretty and so cheerful. The great thing about stencils is you can make a myriad of these one after another. And this is a great TV project, isn't it? Because it's something you can do while you're doing something else, kind of half watching TV, listening to a movie, and then moving on. All right, one more color for down here in the corner. And if you guessed it, it's going to be Bermuda Bay. I love this shade because it's not really a blue and it's not really a green, which means it's going to blend beautifully. So we got Bermuda Bay here. And again, we're going to make sure that we're concentrating on a clean spot because we don't want to pick up those other shades. And then we're going to run this color down here. So let's go ahead and add a little bit more ink. And then again, circular motions. What I want to make sure that I'm not doing is getting ink underneath the stencil, which is why the small circular motions work really, really well for me in my hands. And then let's go ahead and blend just a little bit here. And I think you get the gist. So let's go ahead and close this up. Make sure that ink pad is well out of the way. And now we're going to take off the tape. This is why the tabs are really important because I found without them, I was peeling. I save these because I'm able to reuse them. So let's go ahead and move these up and out of the way. I leave them right on my cutting board. I found I can use them probably 3 or 4 times without having to worry about the stickiness going away. And then here is the last one. But here comes the magic. Oh, look at this. Isn't that a real wow? Now this can just go to your sink and you're going to rinse it out with tap water. You can pat it dry with a paper towel, or you can just let it air dry. But isn't this stunning? Now, let me take my paper piercing tool attachment here, my take your pick. And I'm going to carefully lift this off because this too, we can also reuse. Now, you're going to be looking at my board thinking, well, that ink is going to transfer to the next stencil project, and you are correct. So I've got another tip for you that I want to share, and that's this. I'm opening up my baby wipes. So I'm just going to take one of these out of here, and I don't use these to clean my stamps because most baby wipes have a moisturizer in them, and I don't want that on my stamps. I'm just going to go ahead and clean off that excess ink. You can see there's nothing fancy about this. Before you move on to your next piece of paper, it's really important that this surface is dry. So what I'm going to recommend, I'm just going to clean these off because we're going to do more here in just a minute. I'm going to recommend is that you have a little dry rag nearby and you just make sure that that's good and dry. Now, before you join me, I made one and I cut it down because I want to finish this card before I show you the other 4 techniques. So let me place that off to the side. And let's bring in another piece of cardstock, and this is basic black. Now, if you've ever wondered, what color do I border it on, and you're in doubt, make it black. Wait till you see what happens to this. So I'm going to add a little bit of adhesive to the back 4 corners of my cardstock. And I decided to make this very, very narrow. I did not want to take away from those beautiful colors. So this is just a 1/8 of an inch margin. And remember, all the cutting dimensions, pictures, and supplies are going to be in that project sheet. My card base is 4 1/4 by 11. I did score it before you joined me. Now you might be looking at this background and you might already be thinking, oh, tell me you are not going to cover that. Well, I'm not, but I have another great idea for you. Let's go ahead and just add a little bit of adhesive here. And let's go ahead and center that here on the card base. Again, a very narrow margin because I want the focus to be that beautiful background. Now, I did this ahead of time, and don't worry, I have an entire video here on YouTube. All you have to do is put in my name, Lisa Curcio or Lisa Stamp Studio, and type heat embossing, and you're going to learn all about how to heat emboss, which is what I did. I embossed white on black cardstock, and this has been fussy cut. There is no dye. Let me talk to you about fussy cutting. Just go around the letters. It's okay if it's not perfect. I'm going to flip this upside down, And I'm going to add a couple dimensionals here to the back side just to balance this. And then I'm going to use that same piercing tool attachment. Remember how I used that to lift up my paper? That's going to take off those backings, and I did not have the heart to cover this. So I put it down here, but if you've watched any of my videos, you know I cannot resist bling. So I've got the 21, 23 in color jewels, and I went a little rebel, okay? So you can see all these gorgeous colors. They already have glue dots on the back, so I'm going to go ahead and use that to my advantage. I am taking one of the yellow ones and I'm gravitating that here over one of the yellow sections. Then I'm going to gravitate to kind of one of these green ones, and I'm going to lift up one of those, and let's put one of those over here. Because they have a beautiful iridescent background, you are going to find that these are going to pick up the colors famously. Because of that iridescent background, it's really going to pick up the hues that you've laid down on the cardstock already. A very simple but classy card, and this is one you can make oodles of. The other reason I love this, it's a card the kids can make. So give them bigger pieces of cardstock and let them have some fun. All right, now let's move on to our next one. All right, let's go out and get that little board back because we're going to need that one more time. And this time I'm going to work on a smaller piece of paper because I'm going to just give you a sample. Remember, I have 5 completed cards for you, so I'm not going to go through the entire process of a whole piece, but I want to teach you. So this one I'm going to hold vertically because that's going to make more sense when you see my finished card, right over the tape. And now I'm going to dig out that stencil that I've been wanting to use on this one. This is from the different package. This is the basic patterns. Kind of looks like leaves, doesn't it? But I also think that it's abstract enough and modern enough, a little bit of a boho, that it can be used for anything. I am going to do my best to align this unless you purposely want to make it slanted. So please keep in mind that your stencils are extremely versatile. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to anchor this down on several sides just to make sure it's not going to move on me. And because my paper is smaller, that looks to be enough. Now I'm going to grab an ink pad we've previously used on the other card. And this is pumpkin pie. And I'm going to come back to the blending brush for my orange, which was here. And now we're going to add a little bit of color here towards the top. So again, I'm going to add some color here. This time, like I had told you when we first started, you want to be able to control the coverage. So I'm taking some of it off. What I'm going to do is I'm going to work in small circular motions across the top of this cardstock. I am very careful to make sure that I'm trying to get even coverage. Now listen, none of us are perfect paper crafters. So if you have some density in one area versus another, that's completely fine. I'm going to come back here because I know that area is pretty saturated and I can pick up more color and add it back down. All right, let's go ahead and add just a little bit more for this because I want to show you the whole purpose of this next technique. So let's go ahead and add a little bit of more of that pumpkin pie. Such a pretty color. It's a great orange color and it's perfect for fall, which, believe it or not, is not far away. We'll be making those holiday cards very, very shortly. All right, I'm going to switch over now to an entirely different color. And this time it is Poppy Parade. Now you might think, ew, okay, but watch. I'm going to go ahead and open that up. And I do have a separate blending brush for these reds. Again, as I told you, if you're going to use them in a variation of reds, you need to make sure that they're cleaned off very, very well before you transition. So I'm going to load this with the Poppy Parade. I'm looking for a clean spot over here. All right, now watch. We are going to overlap across the center. So I'm laying to the side and I'm working across the top. How heavy or how light that you make this is entirely up to you. There is never a right or wrong way. And I'm going to hold my hand here to help hold this down because I only used a couple pieces of tape. And I'm just going to run this across here. Let's pick up a little bit more color. But I think you get the gist, right? One thing you need to know about stenciling is what it looks like from the top is not what it's going to look like from the bottom. So let me show you. It may look pretty intense from the top, but when you take this tape off, you're going to notice it's either subtle or it's stronger than what you think. It looks really subtle from here, but look at that. So what we have done now is we've taken 2 entirely different colors and we've actually created almost a third color. So you have a beautiful neutral color of these 2 tones together, which is why it's very, very important when you blend that you're cognizant of the two colors that you're placing together. Otherwise, you're going to have nothing but a hot mess. Now, let me show you what I did with this piece. After I provided it on a larger piece of paper, I cut it on a slant. So remember, this was a larger piece, cut it on a slant. I backed it on black again because that just makes all the stenciling pop. If ever you're in doubt, it's black. Look at that. Those Dandy Wishes dies are perfect for this. Nice and simple, and just a simple greeting from the Peekaboo Farm stamp set. And I couldn't resist some gems. So there you go. Very, very, very simple. All right, now let's go ahead and let's move on to our next one. We're going to keep that here. This was a small piece of paper. I'm not going to clean it because we're going to go a little bit bigger. Let me clean this up and just move this so it's easier for my hand. And then we're going to place that here. I think I may have curled this up too much because I don't want it to be bulky in the center, especially for this technique. So let's go ahead and kind of straighten that out. That looks better. And then we're going to tack that down. This time we're using this one. This is the polka dots. Unlike the other ones I just taught you, this one you don't want to do if you're in a bad mood. This one's going to need a very, very gentle hand. This time I'm using Rich Razzleberry, which is a really pretty wine color. Let's go ahead and open that one. And again, I have a separate blending brush for that one that I've previously used. Very careful. You do not want to load too much ink. So again, this whole rubbing off process is very, very important. You want this to be very, very light. Unlike before, I want you to plan on where your focal point is going to be. That's critical for this type of technique. I know that I want my focal point right about here. So I'm going to start here with a very light hand and I'm making small circular motions. You're going to notice I'm not moving much farther out of this area, but I want to stretch a little tiny bit. And when I tell you I am moving ever so gently, that is exactly what I'm doing. I like to take a peek because again, it doesn't look like much from here, does it? So let's go ahead and let's remove that bottom tape. And we're going to kind of use this as a hinge because if we have to, we can put this right back down. And there you go. We have just one focal point. Now you might look at this thinking, well, that's no big deal. Wait till you see the card. Here we go. And here it is all finished. That little bit of stenciling provides a clouded background effect, which leaves whatever you place in the front a huge emphasis. These dies come from the Batik dies. It's actually part of a bundle with the stamp set if you like it. I love it because this can be a card for any occasion whatsoever. And the color scheme, I think, works really well for both men and women. And again, look at that really cute greeting. That's from all squared away. So really, really simple, what I call a faded out technique. All right, let's go ahead and let's move on now because now we're really going to step things up. I'm going to go ahead and remove the tape here from this stencil because we're going to need to use this space here. So bear with me one second. You know, when you're live, you got to do all the transitions all at the same time. All right, let's go ahead and move that out of the way. The next piece that I'm using is something I did ahead of time, but I want to talk to you about this. This is just a small scrap to teach you the technique. I want to take this out of the way because I have a feeling that's a little bit obtrusive to watch. Grid sheets, love these. They come in a stack of 100. You can use both sides. Those are available in my online store. All right, let me show you this stencil because I have a feeling that this one may be well overlooked. This one as well is in the Plenty of Patterns decorative masks. And by looking at it, you're going to see that there's 4 different patterns. Now, you also might be thinking, well, how can I use these individually? Very, very easy. What I recommend that you do on your cardstock is you anchor down the center one, just like I did previously. When you go to move it, you're going to want to make sure you place your tape around areas you don't want to stencil. So let me give you a really, really quick 411 on this one because this one does not use blending brushes. This one, we have to use a different technique, and I'm going to show you why. Here's our piece of paper. Here's our stencil. We're just going to do it in the center for just a moment, just so that you have an idea of how this is going to go. The low tack tape, in my opinion, is my very, very favorite way to do this because it holds it down very easily. We're now going to move in to the Pool Party ink pad. It's a very, very light, subtle blue. And I'm going to bring you in a little bit closer with that camera. I'm going to open this up. You're going to notice that the brush is only going to work really well in here, because otherwise, as we try to get the rest of these areas, it's going to come around the outside. So this is where your sponge dauber is going to come into play. I dedicate one for every color. Again, that is not necessary. You can wash those with soap and water, let them air dry. Just like before, you're going to load it with some ink. Just like before, you want to tap off. You want to be able to control the coverage. The area here is much smaller, which is going to ensure that you can stay within the perimeter and not come along the outside, because then we can reposition this to create a background. Very, very important that you use this in a different manner. I don't recommend small circular motions because of the design in the stencils. Instead, I'd like a little small flicking motion, but I'm rubbing it right against the stencil. What it looks like on the top and what it looks like on the bottom are totally two different things. So again, start with a very, very light hand and make sure that it's not too dark for your liking, because boy, are we going to step this up in just a moment. Wait until you see we do. All right, I think you get the idea. If I wanted to move this and continue my pattern, let me go ahead and just color this one in so you guys can kind of see where this one's going to leave off. That's going to make more sense. If I wanted to move and continue the pattern now, we would move our bounding tapes from the outside, and we're going to reposition this. Very important that your tape is going to cover up a previous stencil image so that you don't copy that onto your paper, and you don't want to apply ink along the edge of your die. It's very simple, but that is exactly how I created this. Now here comes the stepped up part. And I'm going to bring in a product that you probably are thinking, there's no way that's going to be too cool. Yes, it is. I have fallen in love with these. I'm probably going to pronounce this all wrong, so my German friends are going to help me. I'm going to say Faber-Castell, but it's probably something really fancy like Faber-Castell. But these colored pencils are amazing. They are a wax base. I love the 36 count, and I'll be honest with you, if I had to do it over again, I probably would have bought more colors. Incredible. But are you ready? Not only can you color with these all your outline images, wait till you see what we're going to do with this stencil. So I'm going to put those off to the side, and I've pulled out this blue one here. Now, when you do this technique, I am going to recommend that you choose a pencil that's going to be complementary to whatever it is you're going to be coloring in, which is why I chose this. Pool Party and a slightly contrasted blue. Very important. If you have a very sharp tip, this will not work well. So you're going to rub it to kind of get yourself a little bit of a blunt, soft edge. Watch what I'm going to do. I am going to take my pencil and I'm going to add a little color here and a little color there. This doesn't take any rocket science. Turn your hand and you're going to do the same thing here. Now you might be thinking, well, I don't get it. Does that look like really like much? Oh, just wait, because I have one that's all finished for you. The great thing about these pencils is how soft the lead is. If necessary, you can actually erase this very gently if you get a line that you don't like. All right, I think you've got the idea. Now on a larger scale, look what I did. Is this not incredible? Let me move you out so you can see the whole card, because it is really quite spectacular. This is all colored pencils. Incredible. You are going to find these colored pencils in my craft room favorites. I put them there for you because you are going to thank me. They are by far the best pencils I've ever used, and I've used many over my 23 years as a demonstrator. These are not watercolor pencils. That's very, very important that you understand. I am using a regular colored pencil to lay over a stenciled background. I see Gina's providing the link now in the chat. But do you see that little bit of pencil, what it does to this image? Isn't this incredible? All right, but I've got one more for you, so hang on. Then we're going to gravitate over to an image. Now, you might be thinking, well, that's not stenciling. Hang with me, and I'm going to bring you in a little bit closer for this next one. This little image comes from a really fantastic stamp set called Pirates and Mermaids, and I know that's really big because I just zoomed you in, but isn't that cute? Really overlooked, I think, in the annual catalog. But the one thing I love about this image is not only is it easy to color, but it's great for those kid cards or those sea lover friends. Now, I love my Stampin' Blends markers. That is no secret here if you've watched any of my videos. But watch what we're going to do tonight. We're going to start with a smaller tip because that's a pretty small area. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to color in some of those scales. So just very much like you would do with a dye-based marker, you're just going to color. No biggie, right? I'm not even going to do it all. I think you're going to get the gist. There is alcohol in these markers, so you need to be patient and allow a few seconds for that to evaporate because we are going to do just a tad of highlighting with the dark. Now, this is not the stepped up part. We're not there yet. Now that that's evaporated, what we're going to do is we're going to take this and we are just going to run this across the bottom of each of these scales. That's just what I'm choosing to do. Obviously, you can color however you'd like. As that second layer of alcohol begins to dissipate, we're going to do a little bit more blending, or you can leave it like this. For grins, let's just say we left it like that because that's a really small area to blend. I've got another image here that I did that completely to before you joined me. Now here comes the stepped up part. Do you remember this pencil? All right, watch. We're going to make sure we've got our blunt end because I could have turned it. And I'm going to work down in just one area here to give you an idea. I'm going to add a little bit of that blue right here and right here, right above that dark Stampin' Blends. Now you can use one color of the blends or you can use two. It's entirely up to you. Now I've got one that's finished with a stencil background. Hang with me. Then I'm moving over to this color, kind of purpley, isn't it? And I'm going to rub that to get a blunt end. And I'm going to go right over the top edge of that. Do you see what's happening? It's kind of turning a purple color. When I was thinking of mermaid scales, I was thinking of iridescent colors under the sea. And although I have all great nephews and no nieces, I keep bothering Gina that I need a granddaughter. We'll see. I wanted that little bit of that variation in color, but that wasn't enough. So I had to bring in another color. I mean, you could just have a field day, okay? And then I went right over the top of that one. Now we are really zoomed in on this so you can see really nice and close. But are you ready for what this looks like when it's all finished? Okay, so let me move you out so you can see the whole card. And here it is. That stencil background is no different than what we've done. I did dark to light, which means I started with a heavy hand up here and I created an ombre finish. That's what this is called. I did dark to light on purpose. But look at her scales. Do you see the multicolors and the depth? So colored pencils are going to work beautifully over your Stampin' Blends markers. I bet you didn't know that. Isn't that amazing what you can do? I love to color. I find it extremely therapeutic. And I love coloring simply because colored pencils are easy. You can erase them if you got a boo-boo. So let's work backwards. We worked on this one today, which is our ombre with our colored pencils over the Stampin' Blends markers. The other technique was a very subtle stenciled background, kind of a mosaic where you can move around a small pattern and then pencil for highlights. And then, of course, we had what I called out my fade outs. You have one little focal point, and then you fade out for the color. And then we have this one. So this is a two-tone blend. You're going to want to be careful what two colors you pick together so you don't get that ugly color in the middle. And then cut it on an interesting angle or use your die cuts. And then last but not least was the one that I actually assembled for you. This is just a rainbow spectrum. So very basic stenciling, how add simple colors. Again, you can see where the blending comes into play to make some really gorgeous cards. Now, I have big news to share with you that's coming up Wednesday, and I want to make sure that you put this on your calendar. Let me turn the camera around while you comment and tell me which one is your favorite. Oh, I love seeing your comments. Thank you for all the kind words. Now, I promised you a big announcement, and that is something that's coming up in just 2 days from now. That is this Wednesday, which is going to be July, I think, 21st, I believe. Same time, 8 p.m. Eastern time. You're going to want to come right back here, and I'll tell you why in just a minute. Do me a favor, if you've liked tonight's video, please give it a thumbs up, share it on social media, share it on your Pinterest board. Head over to lisastampstudio.com. You can shop there, use my host code, and you'll get exclusive and very generous ordering rewards. All that information is there for you. And while you're visiting, if you scroll down about halfway, you're going to get a pop-up where you're going to be able to receive a free project sheet PDF tutorial by email every single week. It is no frills. It's just my way of sharing more inspiration with you. That tutorial is not shared on any of my other platforms, so I would love to include you. And don't forget, I'm reaching for it because it's buried underneath stencils. tonight's project sheet. The link is down in the video description below now. You can go over and get all 11 pages for all those amazing cards. Subscribe if you're not subscribed and click that little bell icon in the word all because that's going to be really important for Wednesday. We have a very special YouTube premiere for you. We are going to be here in the live chat during the premiere of this video, and it actually is going to include Gina. Gina Hawley is going to be my guest. You are going to be amazed at the projects. Not one, but we have 6 projects to share with you for a really awesome fun fold card. And unlike our previous video, this time we are stamping together simultaneously through the whole thing. I would love it if you would set a reminder so that you can join Gina and I this Wednesday, July 21st at 8 o'clock Eastern Time. We want to be able to interact with you in the live chat, so make sure you log in. It's going to be a great time. And then after that, I'm going to be live with you again next Monday. And I got to look at my calendar because the month is flying by. It will be July 26th, which is the following Monday, next week at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. That will be a live stream. 2 days from now, Wednesday, is a premiere, and I cannot wait to share it with you. We are super excited about these projects. Thank you for being with me tonight. Gina, thanks for all your hard work and moderating. I hope you all have a blessed evening, and we'll see you here for the premiere on Wednesday. Bye-bye.